Bangor, Central Maine, Northern Maine, and York County area. These guys are going to take a minute to introduce themselves and tell you guys about what's going on in the state of Maine and what you all need to know about all over. I'm going to start with Bev.
Bev, there we go. Hi, folks. My name is Bev Uhlenhake, and I'm a managing broker at Maine Commercial Realty. I've been doing commercial real estate in the Bangor market for about 20 years, almost all of that in brokerage. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the Bangor area. Some of you have seen me do the major presentation before with all of the statistics. We're not going to get that detailed today. We're just going to talk about overview. So, and I think the rest of them are going to do the same, or they're going to really show me up. So anyhow, if I can go to the first slide. That's what we're doing. There we go. So one of the major things happening in Bangor and all the way across the state, you heard Elizabeth Fraser talking about this earlier today, is the need for housing. And there have been some significant developments in Bangor in housing. A lot of our downtown buildings that used to just have retail on the top or on the first floor, and then had sort of a museum of old stuff on the upper floors, have been converted or not converted, but finally updated to include a bunch of residential, and that's what you see up here on the left-hand side. Yes, there's a lot happening, and yes, there are a lot of new units. There's still not enough. Other developments happening, you see up here in the upper right-hand corner, is a new development coming in. Actually, lots of interesting stories there about code and planning board and all sorts of things, not exactly related to what we were talking about this morning, but similar. And Bangor was doing a really good job of actually making sure that it did go. So that development is going to be happening. Lower right-hand corner is actually a Penquist development, so some subsidized housing as well. Move on to the next. I want to just talk a little bit more about the housing and what's actually happening. These numbers, I don't expect anyone to look at them in detail right now. This is right off the City of Bangor's website. Just this year, so this is fiscal year. First quarter would be July to, hello, back one, excuse me. Sorry about that. So in the first half of this fiscal year, there were 59 units that were built. You see a lot of units. There are 359 units in Bangor that are approved for development. Some of them under construction now, and some coming in 2024 and later. So lots of things coming. That said, we still need more. I see Ann Krieg sitting here right up towards the front in economic development in Bangor. And we know, obviously, that we need more housing, we need more employees. If we're going to continue to grow and have more businesses, we need those employees here. Okay, next slide, please. Industrial. I know in the past I've talked about the vacancy rate in industrial in the Bangor market. It's been very, very low for a long time. We're below 1% of vacancy. That is not functional vacancy. That is too tight to move. The companies you see up here on the slide are all people who've grown in the last year. Most of them have not grown physically because they can't. JSI and Nile are the only two, I think, on that slide that actually added any physical space. The rest of them all want to, but there's no place to go. So they keep adding people. Actually just did I'm looking at a building to list, and they've grown so much, they're so tight that OSHA's looking at coming to them because they're just on top of each other. There's just not enough space. So that's what's happening in our industrial market is we're just extremely, extremely tight. Next slide, please. In our market, office market, we've always been tight in the Bangor area for suburban. That hasn't changed, and I know that that's different than what they're talking about in the other room in Portland, because in the Portland area in southern Maine, just in general, you had a lot of folks moving out of office space and working from home. That didn't happen in northern Maine. A lot of our buildings are, number one, where a lot of buildings are one story, so we didn't have to worry about elevators during COVID. So we were able to stay in our offices. A lot of folks are, in smaller offices. They're not offices of 500 people. We're offices of 10 or 20 people, and so we were able to keep safe. A couple of major developments in the downtown region. There we go. On the upper left-hand corner, that's One Merchants Plaza. That building was only about 40% full when the current owner bought it in 2019. It is now completely full. The one here on the right-hand side was the Maine system office. It was vacant for almost 10 years. That was bought by a developer in January of last year, and Wabanaki Public Health is occupying the entire building. So those are two major buildings. We're talking about probably 50,000 square feet that we filled downtown just in the last probably 2 years. So that's a lot. I did want to, there are some other things happening. That lower picture is actually at SMRT's new space in downtown. So I don't know if there's anyone in SMRT here in the room. They've been in Bangor for a little while, but they've just occupying a new space. I think they just moved in the last month. Next slide, if we can get to the slides. And then retail. Retail, we're also pretty full. I will say the major, so just hear me out. We're full. We're full, and being full actually is bad for economic development. It sounds really good. Landlords love it. But we need some empty space so we can have some businesses growing. We do have some things happening. Rennie's is coming in. That's, for Bangor, is a really big deal. So Rennie's is coming in. We have some new developments. Starbucks is coming in with some other things and has some availability. The upper right-hand corner here is actually a rehab hospital that's being built on Outer Broadway. Okay, no, I'm not missing anything. There you go. That's a little bit about what's happening in Bangor.
Hello, my name is Rossignol, and I'm an associate at Maine Realty Advisors here in Portland. And I'm pleased to be here today to talk about commercial real estate in northern Maine, where I grew up, and I'm currently a business owner. So the three things I want to touch on here today are the redevelopment efforts at Loring Air Force Base, the redevelopment efforts in Millinocket at the former paper site, and the Presque Isle Industrial Park. So the redevelopment efforts at Loring Air Force Base are being led by Steve Levesque. And for those of you who don't know, he led the successful redevelopment of the Brunswick Naval Air Station. And so far, he and his team have been able to attract some real interest in the site, more interest than there really has been in quite some time. And if you look at my slide here, you'll see DG Fuels is a Washington, D.C. based company who has plans to build a $4 billion sustainable aviation fuel production facility, expected to create 600 long-term jobs, 2,400 temporary. A project like this would inject a massive economic stimulus to an area that really, really craves it. Construction timeline, hoping to get it started by 2024 or 2025. Currently in the site investigation / cleanup phase. Another part of the Loring story is the company Green for Maine. Green for Maine acquired 450 acres of land at the site, including 49 buildings. They currently have over 500,000 square feet of available industrial space. Green for Maine also plans to redevelop 750 units of former base housing. The projected construction start date on that is 2024. Other developments here are in the aerospace industry. There's been a lot of interest for that. Next slide. Now moving forward to Millinocket. This is the redevelopment project of the Great Northern Paper Mill. For those of you who don't know, This site was considered one of the largest paper mills in the world, and I believe accounted for 20% of all newspaper in the United States. So the story here is you have the nonprofit R. Katahdin, who is essentially a group of accomplished professionals with ties to Millinocket, some still living there, some not. And they want to see this site be developed. So at this point, they've generated interest from Katahdin Salmon, and they have plans to develop a $250 million ground-up aquaculture facility. And I've had the pleasure of speaking with their team, and Marion Nace and Eric Heim, and they're the real deal when it comes to aquaculture and have done this really all around the world. Other industries are trying to bring to the site, obviously, with the existing infrastructure being close to the North Maine woods, are engineered forest products. There's an abundance of renewable energy on the site. They're looking to bring data technology and, of course, light, heavy manufacturing. Next slide. So while the last two things I talked about are kind of things that we hope to see happen in the future, I want to talk about something positive going on in the northern part of our state right now. And I think the Presque Isle Industrial Park has been a very high-performing industrial park in our state. There is over 500,000 square feet of industrial space on this park, and with over 60 tenants, and that's been growing year by year. In my conversations, there apparently is no vacancy, no square footage available. You may be able to find some pockets of office space within some of these buildings, but no vacancy, and really they've been putting up new buildings what feels like every single year. They just completed this winter a $5.5 million warehouse for FW Webb. Vault Enterprises, who is a aerospace research facility, they currently occupy space on the park, but they've kind of outgrown their space, and they're building a brand new $5 million aerospace research facility. So I think the Presque Isle Industrial Park has been a great success story in northern Maine and could be a model for other smaller towns or cities in Maine that have maybe lost some population. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brandon Mitchell. I'm a commercial real estate broker with Malone Commercial Brokers out of Portland. First off, I want to say thank you to MEREDA for having me speak today. The Italian sandwich was lovely as well, by the way. Thank you. I'm excited to be here to be with my fellow panelists to discuss the York County Regional Outlook. For those of you who don't know, York County is huge. It spans the south and west borders of New Hampshire all the way up to Swingin' Old Orchard Beach. There's 215,000 people living in York County, and the largest city in York County is Biddeford. Biddeford, very near and dear to my heart. From the beginning of my career to now, I've done a ton of work and have been able to watch the growth here, and everyone's kind of heard. Everyone knows that Biddeford's been on a tear for the last 5 years, and really to kind of the economic drivers that helped it be where it's at today is Pepperell Mill. 655,000 square feet of mixed-use campus. It has retail, service industry, industrial, residential complexes, just a very vibrant facility right in the heart of Biddeford. And then the town of Biddeford decided to be open for business and demoed the trash incinerator in the middle of town and built their first parking garage, which, if you know anything about Biddeford, parking is at a premium right now. So it's that was just hit right in stride, much needed. And the Lincoln opened about a year and a half, 2 years ago now, right in the heart of the city. I was able to watch that thing go from just burnout old mill to 148 beautiful lofts, sold out like that, 30-room boutique hotel, and Tim Harrington floated a pool on the roof of that building. It was the coolest thing I've ever seen, and what a change it made to the entire downtown area of Biddeford. It was exciting to watch. And then other developments followed, like the Levy. It's a Tom Watson development there around the corner, full of retail and residential campus and self-storage on that. So, you know, kind of with the ongoing popularity of Biddeford, it really kind of shone a light on York County as a whole. Actually, you've got to go back one if you don't mind. Businesses started looking to York County. For instance, John Reedy of Reedy Seafood and I, about 6 or 7 years ago, looked not in Cumberland County, but moved to York County to look for a place to house their seafood processing facility. We found some land on Route 1 in Saco. Saco was an opportunity zone, bought 30 acres there, and he built a 50,000 square foot industrial facility there with expansion of 30,000. Hancock Lumber followed suit right on that Route 1 corridor in Saco, built a brand new facility there. Now down the street, right next to it, Pack Edge is under construction, and they'll be moving in as well. Some notable, retailers and office users have been moving into downtown Biddeford and York County. Collier's Engineering, it's an international engineering and commercial real estate firm, actually just picked up 2 floors on Main Street in Biddeford. Brickyard Hollow Brewing is going to be opening soon in downtown Biddeford. Spurwink Medical expanded their medical offices down there, as well as Batson River Distillery. So it's been good. It's been great. But I'm sure, actually, if you can go to the next slide there, wondering like what's going on now. Currently, what we have under construction. Tim Harrington has a project called the Dunes in Agunquit. It's a luxury hotel and resort. It's under construction as we speak, and he tells me that they will be open for Memorial Day weekend, so get your reservations ready. 5 Points Shopping Center in Biddeford, another kind of a reimagined retail redevelopment. It's going to be like an indoor recreational retail facility from a traditional, inline retail center. He's got pickleball going in there, restaurants, arcade, bowling. So it's construction for that's going to start this spring, and hopefully should be somewhere around next year, be open, and I'll be ready for some pickleball in there. 60 Bar Road, Tom Watson and Joe Porta have another 250 apartments. The foundations are poured, and I think they're framing those out now. Cloverleaf Development, again, in that Saco Route 1 corridor, they're about to turn over 120 new apartments in a community setting. I think they're taking pre-leasing on that right now to be open in April and May. And then 955 Portland Road, Saco. It's a 50,000 square foot building that Northland Enterprises is developing as well for Pack Edge. So, yeah, it's been exciting. And for my dramatic closing here, I'm sure everyone's wondering what is going to happen next. This is always the most exciting part for me, is what's in the pipeline, what's coming down the road here. And again, Tim Harrington has been extremely active in investing into York County, and he has another luxury hotel resort in the planning board now in Wells Beach. That'll be called Camp. One Diamond Development in Biddeford. That was an old lumber yard that I actually was lucky to sell to him, and it's 16 acres of land right along the Biddeford Saco River there. It'll be up to 500 new apartments right there in a kind of a campus-like setting. That is in planning board as we speak. Park North Development, that's another Saco Route 1 corridor development in planning now. That'll be 84 apartments and 79 residential lots. The Pearl Street Riverfront District in Biddeford, that's a super exciting one. That's Jim Brady is working on that project with the city. That's right in where the old trash and garbage incinerator site was, and now it's going to be spectacular. 160 apartments and some retail spaces. The first phase of the project, and there'll be more to come on that as the years go on. And then last but not least, Chinberg, who was partners in the Lincoln, have the Pepperell Mill building, number 11 under contract, and are now going through planning for that for 76 additional apartments. So a ton of activity in York County. It's been really exciting to be a part of the growth and watching it, and I'm just glad to just to kind of keep tabs on it from here on out. But that's what I have for now, and thank you guys very much.
This one's on too.
Okay.
All right. So, new format for MEREDA for everybody who's been here before. This is going to be a little different than what you guys have been to in the past. We have these experts up here talking about what's going on in their markets. I wanted to create a little bit of a fireside roundtable chat, understand more from these guys about what else is planned in the market. I also want to open up in a few minutes to you guys for the opportunity to ask questions to these guys directly, and if there's anything they presented on that you want to drill down into or reiterate. I think there's a microphone right there. Just walk right up. A big topic right now in the state of Maine is housing. So we talked about this a little bit beforehand, just getting together and preparing for this conversation. I wanted to go back through you guys, and I know, Bev, you had some information on housing in Biddeford, but housing is a shortage statewide. You know, away from the numbers for a second, this is going to be a little bit more anecdotal, but what do you think the future of your markets is going to be from a housing perspective? Is there going to be massive development breaking out into your areas, or do you think there are some major projects that are planned that you guys want to touch on? Just pass the microphone around.
I mean, we need more. We need more. It's not easy to do. We need more at all levels. We need more subsidized housing. We need more middle-income housing. We need more high-end housing. I think what people forget as we're talking about housing, because everyone wants to, and the legislature in particular really wants to get around subsidized housing, which is great, because we absolutely need it, particularly when we're looking at our unhoused population in the state of Maine. We need to have some place for people to go. But the reality is there are a whole bunch of people staying in their sort of starter homes or their middle-income homes and not moving up because they're stuck. They're stuck because there's no place to go. They're also stuck because of the interest rate they're in. I mean, I will admit that I am not buying a new home partly because I have a 2.67 interest rate. Why would I ever give that up? So there are lots of problems that people just can't move up into the next level. And then we have the retired folks who then can't buy the starter home back when they want to start to downsize. I would love to talk about like amazing things happening in the Bangor market. The reality is yes, we have things that will be coming online. We need way more than what's coming online. We need developers who are willing to do it. We need bankers who are willing to fund it. We need state programs that are willing to help fund it as well. So I wish I had a magic bullet.
At the end of the day, it's about our housing markets being somewhat unproven for the new product. I talked a lot about these projects that are permitted, but some people are having trouble pulling the trigger and getting the projects going. And I think in part it's the construction costs. We've talked about it ad nauseum. Construction costs are as high as they've ever been. You now have a challenging lending environment, and you have markets where we do have data that shows that that the rents will be able to be supported, but people are not 100% on that, and especially with big projects. When you're starting to get into 60, 70, 80, 100 units, it can be daunting for a developer. So, we've seen a couple of these apartment projects that have been permitted where they're listed right now. That's a little bit of a concern that people are not pulling the trigger on these projects.
Where are you seeing the largest housing crunch in central Maine, Chris? And where are you seeing the most units being developed? Is it a 1-to-1 ratio? We need housing in Augusta's building, or are you seeing Lewiston's really, really tight, but there's units coming online in Jay?
Well, I think that for instance, in Lewiston, Auburn, I think over the past, Eric Cousins gave me a spreadsheet that said that over the past 5 years, they've actually got 400, I think it was like 472 units of housing that's actually moving forward, right? But 472 units over 5 years, so what's that, an average of, 100 units a year or so, call it. So that's, I don't, and then we have a market study that says we need 2,600 units. That doesn't seem to make a dent, right? So, in talking with like John Flatley Co. in Augusta, they've got that 8 Rod Road project that, they've been, it just hasn't, they don't know whether they're going to break ground yet this year. And then you also saw the 375, I can't remember the developer who, Dennis Wheelock's got it for sale right now, but it's permitted and approved, and everybody thought that it was going to happen, and now it's on the market and they're not building it. So.
We've seen some of that in Brewer too.
Any comments on housing in the county or in York?
Well, in York County, I mean, it seems, yeah, this one works. Seems like, the apartments are the hot ones, market rate, and Biddeford, Saco have really, there's a lot more that I didn't even mention that didn't make my slides. One in particular that hit the news recently, the Kittery outlets are going to be demolished, and some housing is going to be built there too. But I'm kind of with you. Where I'm seeing the stall out is through the approval process, and then even once you get to that point, it's the funding. The construction costs coupled with the cost of debt has really put the brakes on a lot of these needed housing units. And the stuff that's in planning board now is exciting. I know, for instance, the Biddeford One Diamond project, that's 500 potential units. But I mean, we had that under contract for 3 years, and it's been 2 years since. So that's 5 years in the making, and that's a hard pill to swallow at 7-8% interest rates to build that kind of a project. So that's where I'm seeing the stall in York.
There were 300 units. Thank you. There were 300 units planned in Kittery about a year ago. Is that still moving forward? I think Matt Rinaldi was the developer on that deal.
Not to my knowledge, no.
Are you guys seeing the same thing where projects that are permitted, that are planned for, are just not going through because of rise of interest rates or construction pricing?
Some.
Yeah, why don't you give me that one? I will say, though, that, I have seen communities stepping up. City of Lewiston and City of Auburn both have enacted incentive programs to help move the needle, and I think that they're going to help move the needle. City of Lewiston recently approved a TIF district for the Lowell Street area, which is in and around that Central Maine Medical Center area that we had a slide on. They put together a 30-year TIF district where the new taxes that are generated in that district, 52% of those taxes are going to go back to the developer over 20 years to help them offset the debt service that they're going to have to incur to do their project. And then the remaining 48% of those taxes are going to go back to the are going to be invested directly in that area to make the necessary infrastructure improvements that are necessary. And I think that, again, I think it's not the end-all be-all, but it is an important piece of the equation to getting these projects off the ground. And I think that in markets outside of Central Maine, and markets outside of Portland, that's what I'm trying to say. Portland, South Portland, Scarborough, where they're hot and there are the incomes to be able to support those rents. I think that there's going to need to be more to encourage developers to take the risk to move forward with these projects.
Okay, for just a second. I want to reiterate one of the things that Chris said, and that is the communities getting involved and the cities getting involved. It sounds like some of the cities in Central Maine are doing it. Bangor has, in their end of the year sort of retreat, the city council sort of named 2024 as the year of housing. They're going to be talking about it a lot. We were also pretty slow in distributing ARPA funds, but when those ARPA funds went out last year, a whole lot of it went to housing. Housing was labeled as one of those. So the communities are working really hard to make this happen. There are just so many environmental factors outside of that slow things down and make it difficult. And it is an economic development issue. If anyone thinks that housing is not, they're not paying attention.
Actually, just to add a little anecdote, on Tuesday in our morning meeting, we were talking about a new semiconductor plant that is being built in Austin, Texas. And again, Austin, Texas and Maine, it's hard to compare the two. But what came up in that conversation is there going to be the housing to be able to support that, what they're doing? And there are, tens of thousands of units under construction to go along with that. I mean, to your point, Bev, it goes part and parcel. If we want to be successful in economic development, we have to be able to have those housing component to be able to support those workers. It's that simple.
So we talked. Oh, this one works. We talked for a second about housing. And by the way, anybody who has any questions about housing, just step up to the podium, ask a question. Don't be shy. I'm going to move on. Feel free to bring us back if anyone has any questions for these guys. In the post-COVID era, I would say that's probably what we're going to be called 10 years from now. We've talked about how rising interest rates has hurt people's ability to develop housing. I want to understand, the other major factor in COVID was the fight or flight from office, I'm going to call it. What is going on in your office markets? Is it the same thing that we're seeing in Manhattan, where there's 35% vacancy, or are you seeing your markets sustaining? I imagine it's going to be a different answer for each of you, and I'd like to hear what you guys are seeing.
I'll start off with, York County's more of like a kind of a secondary office market. So really, a lot of growth or maybe, someone expanding from Portland or maybe coming up from New Hampshire, Boston, are kind of have like a 2,000 to 3,000 square foot space or smaller. That's kind of the niche. So I haven't noticed really any kind of glitch one way or the other in our office market. That being said, I leased second floor office space to a tattoo parlor. So, there is some creative reuses being done, but on a much smaller scale in York County than we'd see in probably some of the other markets in Maine where they have larger campuses.
We're packed. We don't have room. I talked to a couple of tenants last week, and we're talking about relatively small office, so they're in that nimble category of 1,000 to 3,000 square feet. I have two things to show them. Two.
So, Bev, I want to understand retail. Zero vacancy.
We have
housing, zero vacancy. Office, zero vacancy. Everybody in this room should be talking about developing in Bangor right now.
Absolutely. It's the interest rates.
Yeah.
It's the interest rates. It's the cost of construction. And I'm not saying retail is not 100% full. Retail is doing okay. We can talk about the Bangor Mall for a really long time. Those of us in Bangor actually would rather not talk about our interior malls.
I've got your comment
because they're really
here.
not pretty at all. And maybe those are our solutions to industrial and housing at some point, although those are sort of costly to renovate in that way. But we're really, really tight. And it's tough. If someone in Bangor wants to move their office, they need to be thinking 6-8 months down the road, because what I'm doing to get them a space that they want is to find a tenant that maybe is underperforming in their building and the landlord's willing to get rid of them to put the new tenant in. That's how tight it is.
Is the issue that rents are just so low they can't support the raising interest rates in the new developments? I mean, is everybody paying like $10 a square foot and people are holding onto their spaces?
That is definitely part of it, is that we have been traditionally, our rents have, I'm going to give a wide berth to this number, but maybe around 60% of what Portland pays. I know you and I talked at one point about, okay, so what can you expect in downtown Bangor for a retail rent rate versus what you might expect in the old port? And I think you were at about 3 or 4 times what I gave as an estimate for downtown Bangor. So there's definitely a difference, and so you can't justify the cost of construction. One of the things that came up the other day at the MEREDA public policy meeting is we're talking about updating MUBEC and MUBEC codes and international building codes and how that impacts every area of the state. It absolutely impacts every area of the state, but when you have rent rates that are lower like you do in Bangor, and the construction costs in Bangor are the same as the construction costs in Portland, but we're not gonna bring in the same rent rates, it's an even bigger obstacle for us to overcome and for our developers to overcome. The other thing in the Bangor market is that we just have a lot of developers who, traditionally the greater Bangor developers are folks that are buy and hold. They're a little bit more conservative in terms of what they build. They don't build on speculation in the same way that you might see in some of the larger markets, because we know when things go down, we don't have a bunch of demand. I mean, we talk about being packed, and that's great, but that doesn't mean that we have a ton of demand. It means that when we do have demand, we don't have any place to put them. We've always ridden a different roller coaster. Ours is, and I don't want to say we're the kiddie roller coaster in Bangor, but in terms of how we move, we do this. The rest of the world does a little bit more of this. But we're just, we're moving right along. We don't go up quite as quick, but we also don't go down quite as far. But now we're at a point where we're just freaking tight.
Do you think that means rents will be going up?
Oh, rents are definitely going up. Rents are already going up. Our industrial rates are probably twice what they were 5 years ago.
Give me actual rates. What are you seeing? Industrial rates, retail rates?
You know, a 10,000 square foot industrial building, not standalone, $750 a square foot, triple net.
Where historically was $3 or $4 a foot.
You could have gotten it $3 a square foot probably 8 years ago. So significantly different.
Yeah, like in Augusta, I would have told you a couple of years ago, right around pre-COVID, that market rates for decent office space was 12 to 14 modified gross. Now we're routinely signing leases in the low to mid $20 modified gross range. And there's very little vacancy except for your 10,000 square feet and above over on Gabriel Drive. But
There's something going on here.
he might want to call a roofer.
I'm building in Bangor now. I'm out of Augusta.
But to your question about what we're, there's been a lot of documented about who is utilizing their offices and who isn't. Back to the discussion I had earlier, the large office vacancies are the ones that are the big wide open floor plates that had that were 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 square feet of just wide open cube space where there were essentially clerical workers, people doing routine tasks that they can now do and work by home. So that's the spaces that we're seeing vacant. But the professional office spaces, the ones that need to be utilized by professionals who need individual office spaces or who need collaborative work environments, we're seeing those still being in demand.
Well, it's come to my attention that we've run out the clock, which actually makes sense for the cheering next door. Yeah. Let's give these guys a louder round of applause so these guys next door here.